Well, good morning and welcome to Coffee with Doc here on this Wednesday morning on November the 11th. And glad you joined us here, whether it's in the morning or in the evening. Before we get started, let me remind you to pray about me teaching through the book of Revelation, knowing that it's going to be more of a summary than anything else. We're not going to get bogged down in it. I'm not going to go into deep controversial things. We're just going to kind of give a synopsis of the book of Revelation and see if the Lord will teach us anything. He said we're going to get blessed just by reading it. So if we do nothing but read it, we'll still get blessed. But today, I want to talk about Matthew chapter 28, verses 16 through 20, and talking about what to do while we wait, or back to the basics. That's really what the Lord told those 11 men who gathered with him on that Galilean hillside or mountain where Jesus had told them to go. And we want to talk about that this morning. Remember the 2 points I made yesterday, that number one, God is still God. He hasn't climbed down off the throne and abdicated the throne. And the second thing is that God is still at work in our world. He may be working differently in America now than he is in other parts, but God is still at work, and he's working on a global scale, not on a small, dependent on America scale. So with that in mind, as his people, what do we need to do to get back to the basics? And as we go through Matthew chapter 28 here, the last things that Jesus said to his men before he met with them again on the Mount of Ascension, with those 2 points in mind, let me tell it, when all else fails, read the directions. When all else fails, go back and see what you were supposed to do. When you don't know what to do, you go back to the basics. And there are three of God's basics found in what we call the Great Commission. And the three are: rely on his power, respond to his plan, and relax in his presence. So that's the three things we're going to deal with today, tomorrow, and on Friday. First of all, rely on his power. I'm reading from verse 18 of Matthew 28. Then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Well, when you see the word therefore, or you see the word then, it's in a context, and it's all based on what's gone before. So when you see the word then Jesus came to them, you got to go back and say, well, what does that then refer back to? Well, you refer back to verse 16. And when you get to verse 16, you find this: then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. Then, there's another then. Well, what did that refer to? That then refers back to when Jesus appeared on the shoreline after the resurrection, in one of those post-resurrection appearances. And you remember, this is where Peter climbed out of the boat again. He's always getting out of the boat. And we can laugh at Peter for not walking on the water, but at least he got out of the boat, and we're content with boat life, I guess. But he got out of the boat, ran to Jesus, to the shoreline, fell on his face, and he didn't need for John to tell him that it was the Lord. He knew it was the Lord, and he said, my God and my Lord. And Peter was never the same again. So something happened to Peter. And something happened to the other disciples, but not all of them. And that then in verse 16 refers back to that. So we get to verse 18, we got to go back to verse 16. Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. And when they saw him, they worshiped him, but some doubted. I don't know of a better description of our world today and our country today than this: some being obedient and some doubting. Now, here's the thing I want us to understand. That then, the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they didn't know what to do, they simply had total obedience, even without understanding. See, they didn't understand all of this. Peter had reached the point, he said, I don't care what y'all do, I'm going fishing. And it wasn't that Peter wanted to go out on the bass boat and catch some bass and relax. Fishing was his vocation. Fishing was the only place he knew what he was doing. Fishing was the only place he had that was a comfort zone for him. He could be in control fishing, even though he didn't catch very many fish. At least he knew what he was doing. He was in control. And he led the others, and they said, we're going with you. But something happened that they decided total obedience, even though they didn't understand, was what they must do. And so they found their way to Galilee, and they found their way to this mountain that Jesus told them to go to. Let me tell you something, people. Obedience does not demand understanding. You don't have to understand or agree with everything that's going on in our world around us right now. But you can still be obedient to God. And here's what they did. They were obedient to God. It says they went back to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. And when they saw him, not when they saw the mountain, not when they saw the beautiful hills of Galilee, no, when they saw him, there was total obedience, even without understanding, and they put their eyes on Jesus. They got their eyes off of everything else and put them on Jesus. If I can say one thing that's going to help us today, it's get our eyes back on Jesus. Total obedience without having to understand everything and putting your eyes on Jesus. Now listen to the next thing. And they worshiped him. Oh, when you get your eyes back on Jesus and worship him. But then it says, but not all of them. There will always be some who doubt, some who hang behind. But he said, you obey, you focus on Jesus, and you worship the Lord no matter what anyone else what anyone else does. So, two thens, their obedience, focus, and trust gave way to the second then when Jesus said, all authority is given me in heaven and earth. You see, when they decided to rely on his power, it wasn't just some authority. It was all authority. Jesus doesn't say, all authority is given me in a room where all of the people believe. No, he said, all authority. All authority. If you're wondering how much all is, it's not just in some places, but it's in all places. He said, all authority in heaven and in earth. That word all in the English language is a translation of a Greek word pas, P-A-S, and it means something. All. It means everything. All. You can't go anywhere where he's not the authority, not a authority, but the authority, power. And he says, rely on my power. Because he says this power that encompasses all, not will be given, but it has been given. It's an accomplished transaction from God the Father to God the Son. And he has all power. Folks, we need to rely on his power. Are you doing it today? Rely on him. He has all authority and all power. Bless you. We'll see you tomorrow, and we'll pick up right here, because there's two more things other than relying on his power. But buddy, friend, lady, you got to do that first, is rely on him and his power. God bless you. See you in the morning.